So has it always been baseball?
It has since I slid out of the womb. It really, really has. I mean, I think God intended me to be in sports in some way. I was just a very strong-willed kid, very hyperactive, so it kept me busy, kept me out of trouble, and baseball was the one I was most talented in. I really did love basketball, though. I'm a very short human being at 5'9", so I'm really not built like a basketball guy, maybe more of a fullback. So I chose baseball, and I'm glad I did.
And then getting to college, how early on were you being recruited?
Surprising enough, it was a weird process for me. I started kind of getting noticed as a freshman. I started as a freshman in high school on the varsity team. I was just bigger than everybody else, to be honest. They called me man child. I was a kid that when they went to the ballpark at 13, 14, I had to bring my birth certificate because I already was shaving and everything else. I was fully grown at 12. So at the end of the day, I was very fortunate to be at a very good program and I got noticed at a very young age, but that didn't really translate into quote unquote scholarships or opportunities. It kind of uh, was weird that too short, too thick, too bulky, whatever have you. They didn't have analytics then, so it was very different. So I didn't get recorded the way I thought I would. I was going to go to Clemson, and then Coach Corbin actually went to Vanderbilt, so that kind of blew up that dream. And then from there, I was just like, where do I go? So I started writing letters to schools I wanted to go to. Wanted to be in Middle Tennessee, and they finally reached out and recruited me.
So 3 seasons there. How did you see your potential for the next step change over those seasons?
Well, when I went there, I planned on leaving my junior year. I wanted to get drafted. I wanted to play pro ball. Not that I didn't want to finish school, but it was the fact that I was a kid that, if I put my mind to something, I was going to accomplish it, whether I had to run through walls, whatever have you. It was just my personality. So kind of put that out in front. And then I go out and hit 169 my freshman year and really struggled. It was the first time I really failed. It was blessing in disguise in the long run. Ended up going to summer ball, meeting a couple of guys, especially the coach there. And he took me under his wing and he fixed a flaw in my swing that I never knew I had. And, the next year I was all conference. Then the next year All American got drafted. So sometimes we try to be perfect. We try to do all these things, especially in today's society with social media, where we're trying to paint this image, but the reality of it is, like, failing is really the greatest opportunity to leap forward, and it's exactly what happened my freshman year.
That kind of lends itself to the power of coaching, does it not? I mean,
It does.
if you have
It
good
does.
coaches, you're almost at an advantage.
Yeah, I think honest coaches where I'd go with that. Like, I think too often, you can be a great guy, a great woman, and love on the people that you're around, but you could do it for your own benefit. Or you could just love them and serve them and care for them no matter what. And ultimately you're trying to do it for their benefit, which is ultimately what? Your benefit too. So I think, yes, I think the good coaches, it just depends on your, I guess, outlook of a good coach. My outlook on a good coach is guys like Tommy Farr, Jerry Weinstein, and those two guys couldn't be any different. One's very high strung. One, I'm not sure if he even has a heartbeat sometimes because he's just so even killed. But they both had the ability to pull out the best in everybody that's around them, their other coaches, families, parents, and their players. So, yeah, I completely agree. I was very fortunate to have a very good coach in college who made me tough. I thought I was tough, and then I met him. I watched him get hit during BP, go, and then just keep going. I mean, and that's the kind of mentality you see right out in front of you as a kid, and you want to emulate it. You think about when you're a little kid and you want to be Batman or Superman. In college, you see your college coach take a couple balls off the ribs and just continue to throw BP with, no complaint. You have no reason to complain. You get to play baseball.
And then at what point did the Rockies reach out to you?
They were very early on in the process, and then they went cold. I mean, ice cold. I thought it was going to be a Marlin, a Ranger, a Twin, anything but the Rockies. And I actually was very upset when they didn't take me when I thought they would. When some of these teams, I thought it was going to be a third or fourth round pick by projection. So I went out and started shooting basketball, just to clear my mind, something I always did. And then the Rockies drafted me. I think it was 198th overall, and I was stoked, but I was kind of mind boggled a little because the night before I was literally filling out paperwork for 3 or 4 other teams. So you just never know. You don't know who you impress, you don't know why, but that opportunity came, and man, did it ever change my life.
What do you think the scouts saw in you?
I think gritty, hard nosed, and someone that had a tenacity to want to get better. I was never satisfied. That was also a probably hurtful feature in my life too, because I was always chasing more. I was hard on myself at times, but I think they saw the grit, and that they knew that I would do everything I needed to do on a daily basis, and I did. I mean, I don't have any regrets. When I walked away from the game, I felt like I could leave my cleats on the field and walk away. So I hope that's what they saw. But yeah, hopefully it was about me as a person first, and then second was a baseball player. Would be the second part.
And then what was your introduction to the minor league system? Because you had quite an experience within it.
I I was in Tri-Cities, Washington. So here's the funny part. They said, "Hey, you're going to Tri-Cities." I was like, "Yes, staying in Tennessee." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. You're going to Washington State, big boy." I was like, "Whoa, what? What do you mean, like way up there? I'm from Tennessee. Do you want me to go way up there?" I was like, "All right, let's go." And then when we get there, we had double-sided showers. First time I ever seen that. Yeah, so there's a shower head here and a shower head on the other side. Couldn't see the guy's face, but man, saw enough. And it was like, what are we doing here? But like, it was all in all, like it's everything you thought. And I think playing college summer ball kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things. But you had host families there, so I got my host family. They were great. I always was very fortunate to have good host families. But everything else was kind of like, man, this is just different. Like peanut butter jelly every day, which is fine. But it was very, very different. I did do some things, I guess, outside the box. Right out of the gate, I bought my own bats. I made sure I had all the necessities. Some guys would try to like kind of, play it cheap. I thought, man, this is my career. I got to make sure to do this right. And I was advised by a very awesome dude in my life, Charles Patrone. He was like, "Hey, don't ever forget you're the brand, you're the business, and treat it like that." And I did my entire career. So that way, whether it was nutrition, whether it was, I ended up renting a car the entire year, drove 4 or 5 guys to the field home and back every day. It was an expense. It was an expense I definitely wish I didn't have, but that comfort gave me a chance to kind of be ahead of the game.
What do you think that guys who are getting drafted don't expect coming into the minor leagues?
The load. I think that they think it's kind of like college. When in college, you have a 20-hour time limit, right? When you get in a pro ball, there's just so much information, especially when I was coming in, we didn't have as much information in college, right? We had these scouting reports. It was kind of like, "Hey, Jim, this is Larry from South Louisiana. I'm just going to tell you about our guys, blah, blah, blah." And now you get into pro ball and you're like, "Hey, this guy throws 90-92, really relies on this and this, this. And then, hey, we need to throw this many changeups in this given day." It's just information overload. Plus you're working on developing, learning new skills, trying new things, all new plays, all new signs, everything that you could think of. So it's very tough. And then you throw in the language barrier right in the middle of it. And you think about, all right, well, how am I going to communicate with these guys? And then, oh, here's a Japanese guy. So there's 2 different languages they got to figure out. But that actually became one of my favorite pieces of the whole thing, because I got really close to the guys from Latin America, lived with some of them a couple of different times, because that was fun to me, like figure it out, right? Hey, I want to figure out, I'm going to sit down with these guys and figure out how to like kind of joke around, have some fun. And I did. And it was some of the best times of my early career.
I talk a lot on this podcast about sport as a factor that unites, not only within person to person within the same country, but also through languages and through experiences, playing overseas, playing with, like you were saying, different nationalities. How do you think that baseball exemplifies that?
I think it's a hodgepodge. You just kind of throw in a bunch of different things in a blender and let it go. And I think that's the coolest part about it, to be honest, because it is kind of a worldwide sport. And you can go to Italy and go play baseball. You can go to Europe. You can go all over the world, and you're going to find some type of baseball. I feel like you pretty much do that with any sport, but I feel like baseball actually has really done a great job of representing all different nationalities, all different creeds, all different, colors. It doesn't matter. If you can play, you get your opportunity. And that's the cool part is baseball's done a really good job of kind of spreading that message and making sure it's growing. I would love to see it grow more in the inner cities. It's a passion of mine. It's something that I'd love to see some of those, kids that, maybe don't get the chance like they don't in the Dominican Republic, which they've done an incredible job in pro ball building those facilities. I wish we could do it a little bit better job in the inner cities because, they do a pretty good job of basketball and football, but I feel like baseball is the I don't know, one from the outside trying to look in and try to dive in, and I hope they get that done.
So speaking of capitalizing on opportunities, 6 different minor league affiliates.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of toll does that take on you as you're trying desperately to work your way up?
I don't know if I would say I had 1 year where it took a toll on me, but it turns out it was one of my favorite years, and that was 16. I ended up playing on 5 different teams that year, but it was more or less a great opportunity to learn new things. Every team I went to was a little bit different. They maybe ran spring training a tick different than the team I was on previous. Like, when I was in Tampa Bay, they tried the sleep testing and we ended up starting at 9 o'clock. It threw me off completely because, I was on year 14, I believe, or 13 at the time. I'm like, wait. I get here at like 5:36. That's just my thing. So I was always really there way too early and by myself, but I had to stay in a rhythm. So I think more than anything, looking back, it was a blessing and an opportunity to really learn and give me a catapult to where I am today. But during the time, it's one of those things you can be a victim to it and kind of be like, oh, poor pitiful me, or you can look at it as like, hey, I get another chance, another opportunity to go out and do what I love. Let's enjoy the day. Let's serve the guys around me. Let's love every second of this and make sure every chance I can sign a ball, take a picture, whatever have you with the fans around me. Because, as my career kind of unfolded, it's about getting to the big leagues, you get to the big leagues, you hit the pinnacle and be like, all right, now I want to stay here. Had a couple injuries, very unfortunate. And the battle back was, probably some of my greatest times. The journey is always better than the actual, mountaintop. Because once you get up there, you kind of want to go back down and climb it again. So I got to do that a couple of different times. And I look at that as an opportunity to, really say, hey, that's what made me into who I am. And I appreciate it. I definitely wish I had 10 years in the big leagues and I didn't get hurt, but it's who I am. And hopefully I can pour into younger men or women that want to chase a dream and, say, hey, no matter what, you can keep going, or you can say, oh, poor pitiful me. But I'd recommend to just keep going.
And we'll talk about 2016 and all of your moves later because that's a lot. But
You only know the half of it. There's one big piece that I didn't share for a long time, but I started sharing that will kind of blow you away, I think. So
I can't wait. But for right now, we're going to talk about the resources allotted to minor leaguers, because Middle Tennessee is a good school. And I'm sure that you had a lot of resources, and then you get to the minors and there's just kind of a push and pull. I mean, you have to buy your own equipment. You have to get your own transportation. I mean, housing has gotten better, but that's only been recently.
Yeah, I think they're really trying hard to change it, and I appreciate that. But weird enough, when I was at Middle Tennessee, our coach didn't believe in just that kind of free range stuff that you see now. So I got one shirt in 3 years at Middle Tennessee, believe it or not. Yeah, I got my glove, I got my gear and stuff like that. But I got that in pro ball too. I got an all-star deal right out of the gate. They're just amazing. We do some charity work together, just awesome people. But I kind of got set up perfectly for it, to be honest, because I wasn't used to it. I was never really given anything for free. I always had to earn it. So when I got into pro ball, it was no different for me. A lot of guys were just mind boggled, right? They're coming from the Pac-10. They're coming from the SEC. They got 88 pairs of shoes that are orange that they can't wear now. It was kind of funny to me because when I showed up, I was like, wow, like my agent got me 2 pairs of cleats. I haven't had 2 pairs of cleats in I don't know how long. This is amazing, right? So I thought it was more like Taj Mahal than anything else because it was so much different than what I've ever had. The uniforms were nicer, the cleats, the bats, the batting gloves, everything was better for me. So I can't speak on like most guys, they go backwards. I went way forwards.
Now let's talk about mental health resources,
Mhm.
because the late 2000s were not exactly a bountiful mental health dialogue experience. Was there any talk of regulating emotions?
There wasn't enough. And, it's something I'm very passionate with now, actually, partially own a mental wellness company now. And it, it's kind of sad, to be honest. A lot of things get unnoticed, a lot of things that are never spoken of. I've had ADD my entire life. I grew up with 2 learning disabilities, so kind of been in and out of either a psychiatrist or a psychologist's office my entire life. I still meet with one once a month. We've become friends, and I've really gotten into psychology very deeply. But yeah, I think the resources were there. It's just so dehumanized. So there's so many, I guess, hurdles, and then there's people at the top that kind of make the rules and stuff, but they never see. So like whether you need a TUE, whether you need to, speak to someone, you have to go through these channels, and it's never a comfort. The guy walks around the corner, your mental health counselor, he walks around, he kind of peeks in, like almost like a creepy Halloween movie. He's like, "Hey, Michael, come here, I just want to talk to you. You got to catch up." And everybody knows what's going on. Like, even if he did that with everybody, which, depending on what team you're with, they did a really good job making sure everybody got seen. But yeah, I think that's really grown over the years. I still think there's a huge miss because it's not humanized enough. I do think society's making it better to, maybe speak about and being more open. But I think the education side, in my opinion, is the weakest link. Like educating people that, hey, you may have some anxiousness, you don't have anxiety. Hey, you may be really, really sad, but maybe you don't have depression. And kind of make sure that you can walk through that and understand it in your own like ability. Because some people process things a lot different than others. And it's just like, hey, let's take a step back, let's educate, give you the resource opportunities, whether it's e-learning, whether it's, being able to attend a seminar, whatever it is, just open up Pandora's box for from day one all the way through to educate themselves in different ways, get older players to talk about maybe some of the issues they dealt with, whatever they can do to kind of open up the door for someone that, like Drew Robinson, somebody that I think about because I played with him and I would have never thought that. He was a goofball, a lot of fun. And if guys that like probably went through that. And then when I retired, I didn't realize I was going to deal with grief. I retired on my own terms. And I was like, man, I'm dealing with some ish right now. My wife's like, yeah, you're grieving. I'm like, I'm grieving about baseball? She's like, yeah, I think you're grieving. I'm like, maybe I am grieving because you lost this huge thing in your life and you can't replace it like that. I mean, I jumped into AT&T and got on TV and did everything I could to stay busy, but it still didn't replace that time in the cage, that time in the weight room, the camaraderie you create, all those things that you just don't realize you miss until you miss it. So yeah, I think there's a big movement happening. I just hope they start really humanizing it and individualizing it because everybody's so different.
And Major League Baseball has done a pretty solid job of implementing mental skills coaches into major league clubhouses. Now that's not indicative of the minor league systems, but they do have at least one person, most clubs do, that traverses the minor league system offering mental health resources. Although that isn't enough to meet with that person once every 2 months, what impact do you see that having on the game going forward?
I think the key word is the resources. I think looking outside, hiring more people to maybe be consultants, liaisons, or just people that kind of attach to the organization. So that way, even if, hey, so and so doesn't want to deal with maybe the organization, because the fear is like, I don't want to tell them I'm messed up. Maybe they'll hold me back, right? Like, oh, we don't need that in the clubhouse. But like you just had a family member pass away, you just lost a child. and all these things, like that's going to impact you. It's going to impact you on the field. So maybe giving multitude of different resources and making them completely available, but maybe even secure. So that way you can help them as an individual off the field as much as you do when they show up to the field. Because most of the time when you see these sports side guys or these middle school guys, it's at the ballpark, when the best time to probably see them is at breakfast, right? Let's talk before we even go to the ballpark. Teach me, like I'm Daniel's son, right? Your sensei, teach me. Like I want to understand. And I got really close with all those guys, especially as I got older. I kind of migrated towards them to understand each and every individual around me too. And I realized that most of the time when I was calling a game, I was calling to the personality of the guy instead of the actual philosophy behind maybe the way I should call it, because nothing else mattered. So if the guy was high strung, I had to understand this guy's high strung, high energy. How do I slow him down with the pitches I could call, with the movements I can make? All those things started to really play, and it really, really helped me, help guys maybe pull the best out of themselves and then make sure they get all the credit. I would never try to take anything from them. I would just push it back on them. So it really taught me a lot. I mean, I used it in my own context in my own way, but I think the more, like I said, education you can get on the subject and understand it's okay. Everybody has problems with mental health. Everybody. Like we're all human beings. We're all broken. I think the more we're willing to say that, the better. Like I just went through a huge batch of depression. And it wasn't like I said, I'm just going to run through this depression. It's like I had family trauma that I wanted to walk through. And I felt like God put it on my heart to go, all right, you need to bulldoze through this and figure it out, because you're going to change this generational thing that's been in your family for so long. And I feel like a different person. But if I didn't have support around me, and it was hard on the people around me, but if I didn't have that support, I would have never been able to do it.
Let's talk about your position as a catcher and how that plays into not only mental wellness, but also leadership. I mean, I would say that the catcher is essentially like the heart of the defense. I mean, you're working with everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The heart of the defense. I love that. I always said this, and I was the only guy off the field to play. Like I actually was not in play. So I always thought of myself as an extension of the coaching staff. And going back to college, my college coach made me every single day as a freshman, whenever I wasn't playing or when I was, I had to be by him, the pitching coach or the hitting coach, all the way at the front of the dugout. I never wasn't there. If you go look at almost every picture, besides maybe going to the middle to get my mind right if something happened or if I need to process something, I would always migrate right back to the front of that dugout and be next to some coach, because the opportunity to learn and grow and continue to be that extension of the coaching staff and gain the trust from them was always important. Because if I could build that trust, I could bridge the gap to the actual pitching staff or the players around me. So I think my entire career, if I look back at it, I was probably more of a coach than I was a player, because I was always trying to help my teammates, almost to my default, I found out in the long run. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because I was a team first guy. I always want to be a team first guy. And maybe I could have been a little more selfish and gotten a little bit more time. But the reality of it is like, I think that's the way it should be. And I think it makes the game way better. And some of my favorite people on the entire planet that I played with were team first guys.
What do you think is the most indicative factor of a personality that drives a baseball player to be a catcher?
That's a good question. I think early on, it's the high energy and the athletic ability, but like toughness. Because like a lot of kids, especially now, don't want to get hit. Like I don't want to foul tip off the face. I don't want to block a ball off my forearm and have a bruise. So I think a little bit of that. And then I think too, it's who they look up to. When I was a kid, I really looked up to Javi Lopez and Pudge Rodriguez and those guys. So like I was looking at them, I was like, I want to be like them. And I was always floating around the diamond, but it kind of kept pulling me back to the plate. And now the way the game is and the way catching is, some of your like best athletes are behind the plate because of the receiving, all the changing and, the setups with one knee down, the other knee down. So I think there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think it's just really, how tough are you? and how willing are you to sacrifice your own well-being for your team? You know, because you're going to get beat up. Your batting average is probably going to take a hit. I remember all these different times in my career where I played through, you know, my thumb's swollen, I got hit in the hand, I could barely hold on to the ball, like all these different things. Like I still, if I get hit in the right hand, my thumb will go completely numb. So I think I've ruined all the nerves in it. So, but it's part of it.
So then you got called up in 2010 against the Reds. You fouled out, but you were there. Or you flew out. Sorry, you flew out, but you were there. And then you had kind of a rocky next year. And then you were traded to the Red Sox, and then from the Red Sox to the Pirates, and then it just kind of got slightly more chaotic from there. What is the psychology of a major league catcher that gets them to the level of getting the call up?
So yeah, I got called up. You know, what people don't talk about it enough is like 2010, we didn't have a taxi squad. So they travel around with your gear, you know, in AAA. I mean, excuse me, in the big leagues, waiting for you to get called up. Well, I had one, maybe two guys pregnant. I think at the time their families were pregnant. So like they kept telling me like, hey, something's going on. You may go in, you may go up. So I don't play that day in the minor leagues because I think I may go up. So the emotional like toll that takes on you and the pressure you're already putting on yourself because you're on the roster, you're one step away. And it's kind of a wild thing. We were in Colorado Springs, so a lot of times we'd play and we'd get to watch the game. Somebody goes down, we're like, hey, you're getting called up, blah, blah, blah. Like, and the brain starts going, you know, like, okay, I just got this. That's the first go round. And then that fades. Then I got traded. The communication was terrible on that. I got told by my wife and a friend before I did the actual organization. They just took me out of the game and put me in the bullpen. So like those are the emotional things that like I think play with your psyche so much because you're like, oh, I've been here my entire career. So then I go in and it was one of the coolest moments is the farm director got emotional. He didn't want to trade me, but they wanted to give me an opportunity. So go to Boston. I'm there for 2 days in spring training. I get the call up. You don't know that because I went to Texas and I slept in the room for 3 days and then flew back. Nobody will ever know because there was no taxi squad and I had to be completely secret about it. And it's all the in AAA until I showed up to Pawtucket. So when I walked in, I was the new guy completely. And then that's a whole nother round because AAA in Boston, the media presence is huge. So it was the first time I saw like guys getting swarmed around the locker, even almost more than I did when I was called up in Colorado. So you get all these kind of things and all these like swirls, and all you're trying to figure out is who am I? What am I trying to do? And how can I stay, you know, at this level for a long time? And you get so much input, you got to kind of sift through it. I always think about it like how you sift for gold in the old West. You got to find those little nuggets and hold on to them. And that kind of builds you to who you are. So every little thing that I went through and all the conversations leading up to it, then I get traded to the Pirates. That was another wild moment where I'm grocery shopping. My wife just left. I ended up getting the call and I took all my groceries and I put them back on the shelves, packed up, left the next day, and was ended up being in the lineup. We ended up winning that game and heading to Houston. So it's a whirlwind. And, you know, any advice I could say is just pretend like you know nothing, act like you know everything.
Your
If
first
that makes
league,
sense, like have that
yeah, it
confidence.
does. Yeah,
You know, when you
I
walk
really
in,
like
like,
that.
yeah, I got this. So how do you go about your day? About like, so you're always learning, but you have the confidence, like, you know, I can do this on a daily basis. You're not always looking for affirmation. That's the probably biggest detrimental thing I see from guys is they're looking to their left, they're looking to their right, and they're always looking for the affirmation. And as human beings, we want that. But if you can learn to really affirm yourself and be playing for a bigger reason, you don't need that affirmation and that confidence rises, but you turn it into, I want to learn. I don't necessarily maybe need this, but I want to learn this.
How important was it to get that first hit in the majors against the Astros?
Woo!
I mean, how
It's like,
affirming was that for you?
it was incredible. And it was a former teammate that almost caught it, and Clint Barmas. He jumped, and I was like, weigh him down, weigh him down, weigh him down. And sure enough, it just went like beep right over his glove. So yeah, I think every single year that first hit, getting it out of the way is like a huge sigh of relief, because it's weird. Like I've started a season where I start out rocket hot, and I've started a season where I just can't hit anything. And it's a huge difference. I mean, it really is. Like just that jump start is just a game changer in my opinion.
And what a jump start it was, because a month later you got your first home run.
Yeah, that was another. I felt like that was never coming. I kind of gave up on it. Like I used to hit homers. I guess in the big leagues, I'm not gonna hit any homers. Yeah, but that was one of the greatest memories I'll ever have, because we took the lead. It put us in first place. We had 30,000 people at the stadium, and they went bonkers. And I got a curtain call. Like I I don't know if I could have ever dreamed that up or put that kind of like puzzle together, but man, God was very creative in that, and I can't believe it happened, because I literally got the curtain, and I was like, hey, I don't know why I'm doing this, but this is awesome. So special moment. I'll never forget it. The call by Greg Brown will give you chills. So really, really special first home run. You could have easily done it where it didn't matter. I was fortunate enough to do it where it mattered, and it'll be unforgettable.
How affirming was that you were meant to be here at this level?
I think you always have a little bit of doubt, even if I would never show it. But I always believed I was gonna get on a big league field one way or another, as a player, whether I had to like fight, scratch, claw, whatever. So being able to get there and stay there for a considerable amount of time. So it's one thing to make it to the major leagues, and then getting a year of service is special. And then once you get to arbitration, you're like, man, like I've done this for over 3 years. And then, you just have these like milestones that you hit, and you're like, wow, like 25,000 guys have played the major leagues, like 10,000 have done this, like 5,000 have done this, only 1,000 have done this. And you're just like, I'm getting closer and closer to this like level that is really special. So I tried never to take it for granted, because, it's really something you can't really describe. I mean, you're a specialist in your field. If you think about it, like I'm one of the best in the world. So it's special, whether I was a backup or not, because that's one of the funny things I tell people is like, it's funny when they're like, oh yeah, you're just a backup. I'm like, yeah, just a backup in the major leagues. No big deal. It's just always funny, like, yeah, like I'm just the other surgeon in the hospital. No big deal. It's just always a funny thing to me. So
How would you define in one word your time with the Pirates?
family. It's the best way I could put it. Some lifelong friends. Was in Andrew McCutcheon's wedding. Still talk to Jay Hay. And if I saw any one of those human beings, I would definitely do anything for him. I'm Alex Presley's daughter's godfather. So yeah, just like it was family. You very rarely get a chance to play on one team like that. I got to play on a couple.
And then it was interesting that you brought up being a backup. What happens psychologically when, as a backup, you hit a slump and you may not play for an extended period of time, and you just have to live with the fact that you're not at your best?
So early on, it was like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, because I didn't understand what a backup was. I didn't understand what a bench player was. But as I grew up and I embraced that role, and I really embraced that role after the 13th season, I got hurt, and I gave up on the idea of being a starter in my mind. I said, I'm going to be the best backup in Major League Baseball. And I believe I really think in 14, I was really close. So that goal was, in my opinion, achieved, because I would get my hopes up, and I would get the opportunity to come into spring training as a guy that could compete to play every day, but it felt like it was always kind of yanked away from me. So psychologically, I just said, forget it. If I can do this really well as a backup, when I get that chance, I'll take advantage of it, because it's so much easier to play every day. You don't get kind of thrown to the wolves every 3 to 5 days. It's like, go get them. If you're playing every day, you're kind of in a rhythm, you have a good routine, all that stuff. So I changed that mentality, and it really helped me kind of do some, I guess, better things in the game. I didn't worry about my hitting. Hitting got better. I ended up playing hurt in 15 all year, but even that year I won. I think my winning percentage was off the charts in 14 and 15, because that's all I focused on. How can I make sure that we win today? This is my day, whether I'm on a winning team or not. And Colorado was not on a winning team. I just want to figure out a way to make the guy out there 60 feet, 6 inches a little bit better, amplify what he had that day, and find a way to get a W on the board. And more often than not, it worked.
I'm going to use that quote for the social media because it was just so eloquent.
Well, thank you.
How did you get the nickname The Fort?
Man, I'm still humbled by it. So Greg Brown and Bob Walk, that's who's the play-by-play and the color analyst in Pittsburgh, deemed me the Fort, because they said nothing got by me. And obviously the Fort McKenry Star Spangled Banner was written there. So, it held up, through the bombings overnight. And they said I kept holding up the fort, and it kind of stuck. And the fact it followed me around is kind of the cooler part to me. And then if you go to my Wikipedia page, someone told me, and I had to go look at it, it's like, it says nickname the Fort. I'm like, that's just cool. Like, it could have been anything else, like could have been something that wasn't cool, but it's cool to tell people, I'm the Fort, and that's how they, I'm walking down the street in Pittsburgh, like most of the time, if anybody says anything to me, they're like, Fort. So it's a really cool thing. It's so humbling. And I'll be forever appreciative for it. So
when we're talking about the fragility of staying in the major leagues, when you're designated for assignment and it's kind of taken from you, what emotions do you go through after the career that you had in Pittsburgh?
So going to 13, since that's where you started, that one was really hard for me. And I think because it was the first time I felt like I really grew up, because I felt like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put it. I felt so kicked to the curb, in the sense of, kind of started out as giving me a pre-arbitration deal to disappearing to, I didn't end up even talking to the GM when they actually designated me on the last day. I just said no. Like, I was going on vacation with my wife, and they waited till 1 minute before the deadline to designate me. So it gave me no opportunity to do anything before December 1st. So it was one of those things like, man, this really is a cutthroat business. And I think it opened my eyes to like, hey, this is, as much as it's my dream, there's a ton of businesses that maybe I never saw in the minor leagues because I was chasing so much. Now that I'm actually in the major leagues, kind of like, okay, well, why would I get designated again? So you kind of walk through different things. Like, I knew a couple different times, like Colorado, when I got hurt, I played hurt all year. I was hurt in spring training, and I played through July. I had an incredible teammate, Justin Morneau, kind of tell me, he's like, you're done. Like, save your career, you're done. Walked in the office, have surgery that week. And of course, you think, man, I really sacrificed for the team. We had a winning record when I caught. You play all this stuff in your mind. Well, because of that moment, I knew Jeff Bridich, who I was a friend with, as our GM, was going to designate me. I was the first person he called. And I respect that. But the reason why he wanted to designate me, I didn't agree with. So we kind of talked through it. And he actually, ended up telling me exactly why he was designating me. We had a great conversation. And I told him, I said, please, for everybody you ever talk to, just tell them the truth. Like, you don't have to be businessy all the time. Show the players you care. I guarantee you'll get a different type of animal coming your way constantly. So hopefully he did that. He's no longer the GM of Colorado, but I think it teaches you more than anything. Like, that failure, going back to when I was saying, like, my freshman year, every time something like that happened, it kind of catapulted me forward as a man, as a human being, and then as a baseball player.
Let's talk injuries. The torn meniscus, obviously, that predated the assignment. What else have you had?
Well, in college, I had a lateral release. This is all in 06 or 05 or excuse me, 05. I had a lateral release in the fall. I had mono, and I say that I had a very rare case of mono. I lost 45 pounds. Told me I wasn't going to play. Ended up playing the first day, hit 2 homers, which was really cool. And then I went over for like 25. And I probably rushed that back a little too much. I ended up getting MRSA in my knee. And I went into surgery. This was probably the craziest one for me. I went into surgery not knowing if I was going to have my leg in the middle of the season. Well, less than 9 days later, I ended up playing as soon as it got closed up and the infection went away. So obviously I got my leg, like my leg was fine. So those 3 things happened in 05. That was really my first taste, other than a fracture in my first rib in high school, of anything of any sorts. Never got hurt in the minor leagues. And if I did, I never said it. And then I played through some stuff, which doesn't matter in the big leagues. And then that injury in Miami, probably playing one of my better games. I had 4 hits, slid into second. My meniscus just got stuck and I couldn't bend my knee. Refused to come out of the game, ended up finishing the game, won the game. And then I passed all the protocols the next day, which was I still kind of don't know how that happened. So they put me on the DL, get back, and end up flying to California, having surgery about 3 or 4 days later. And turns out my meniscus on both my knees were tilted. So eventually I was going to slice it, and that's exactly what happened. So like I hit that back half on a, jarring movement, and I did both eventually. So 13 and 15, both fine, and then didn't have anything else until I tore my ACL in 2020, right before the pandemic, trying to dunk on my nephew. I spent all off season, all summer, working on trying to get to a dunk status. I got to where I could put that ball in that 10-foot goal at 5'9", tried to dunk on him because he's 6'4" at our family Christmas, and I landed on my toe, and they call it the trifecta. So you land like this, and the shock goes up and it shatters your ACL. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So, but I didn't hurt anybody, just me. So I was pretty happy about that. No other nephew was hurt, so all good.
What
That's
is
my
the
fault.
most,
Couldn't have done
what,
that.
what's the most common injury for catchers?
That's a
I would
great
assume it's
question.
something knee wise or like hand.
I would probably say concussions now. Now that they've brought enough awareness, I think that's gotten better over the last 3 or 4 years. So I would say hands is a big thing, and then knees. Because you get hit in the hand, obviously. See a lot of broken fingers, a lot of broken toes. I'm pretty sure I broke my pinky toe a couple times. But those things you probably, like, we're not speedsters, most of us. So if I broke a toe, as long as I could manage it, I would never say anything. So,
And then moving forward, your second stint with the Rockies, what was the altitude adjustment like going back there?
so as a visiting player, you could really recognize it. For me, I had a hard time sleeping. Everybody has a different, I guess, understanding of the altitude and how to deal with it, and maybe even how it affects them. For me, it was, I knew how to deal with it. I knew kind of what the effects were as a home player, but not as a visiting player. So, when I went out there, I made sure to drink a ton of water, have my electrolytes. I always ate a little bit more going in and going out. So I knew those things, but I didn't realize how bad it would like keep me up. I really had a hard time sleeping. So, if I could, I'd try to nap. But as a visiting player, it's really hard. As a home player, the moving pieces all the time, playing a full year there, would get to you. But I kind of tricked my mind into saying, well, I should be better off. People come out here and train for the Olympics. Like, this should help me. So I kind of played that out a little bit more. And when I went on the road, I actually started working out really hard the days, whether I was playing or not. Every road game I'd work out before. So I felt like I had more energy there. So it calmed me down. And I ended up having a really good year on the road. And that's always the kicker playing in Colorado. He hits well at home, but he didn't hit well on the road. He pitched well away, but didn't pitch well at home. So I tried to find that balance, and ended up doing a pretty good job. I felt like with that balance. So, yeah.
As a catcher in that shifting altitude, how do you regulate the pitchers? Does
Biggest
it
thing,
change anything?
it does, because they bring too much awareness to it. So I think it's just completely like overdone. So they talk about it and talk about it, talk about it, got to get down, got to get down, got to do this, got to do this. When the reality of it is, it's like, if you went to a Little League game, nobody says a word. If you went to a high school game, nobody says a word. It's just another day. Now, do you need to think about throwing your breaking ball maybe out in front more and throw it in the dirt? Sure. But I've never seen Clayton Kershaw have a problem throwing his breaking ball in Colorado. So it's really just the outlook you want to have, the perception you want to see, and just taking it. And that's what I would always say is like, hey, you actually have the advantage here. Like you're more long-winded. Whatever I could tell them to positively move them forward is the only thing that mattered. And then I'd overemphasize maybe something they need to do with the pitch. Because yeah, like there's some days the sinker would not sink, it would cut just because of the altitude and the way the wind was. But I would play the ball instead of playing the pitch. So I would call the sinker and I'd play it like a cutter. I would never even tell most guys, they've never noticed. As long as they were having success, they could care less. So I just learned to kind of adapt for them. And if they wanted to know, I'd tell them. If not, I'd never tell them. We'd just keep moving forward.
And then you went from Colorado to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge change altitude wise, but also, I mean, where are you in your career at that point?
So I knew I wanted to go somewhere where I felt like I'd be protected, because
Protected
my
how?
so coming off that meniscus, like it's a very like tough surgery. So you repair the meniscus, and because it doesn't get a lot of blood flow, it doesn't heal very well. So you want to be very safe in the sense of like, hey, if you tear it again, it's gone. Like you're going to lose that piece of your meniscus forever. So I was safe by signing with Colorado. I took a minor league deal, turned down 3 big league offers to do that because I knew that was better for my mentality and for my well-being and possibly for my career. Luckily, it worked out for my career. And then Texas, I had Jeff Bannister, and I knew the strength coach, and there was a sense of comfort there. So, like, once again, I turned down way more money, way more, maybe even guarantee than to go this route. And I think maybe that was the only mistake signing wise. Well, actually, I made 2 mistakes in my career with teams. That was one of them. And there was another one down the line from that same year. But they tried their best to protect me, but I ended up, starting a little bit fast. And I had some gastro problems and tearing my lower abdomen. I made the team. The day I made the team, I grimaced and fell down, throwing a guy out at second base. And I kind of got caught in limbo, literally in limbo. Like I was not on a roster anywhere because I was going to be put on the major league roster that day. If I made it through the day, I didn't make it through, and I got caught in limbo. So I actually drove when I was actually healed. I stayed back in spring training. I drove to Round Rock. Nobody told me to. Nobody said anything. Just nobody like was giving me anything. And I was like, I need to go somewhere. So I just drove. I left. And they're like, hey, we're going to tell you, you can head to Round Rock tomorrow. I was like, I just pulled into my Airbnb. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah. Like, trainer said I was good. I thought I was good. And I just bounced. Like, you knew you were going to go to Round Rock? I was like, yeah. Like, there's no need for me to go to Texas. Like, you guys are doing great. And kind of started that journey. A month later, I ended up opting out. But yeah, it's just, it gets crazy as you get older. As you get older in your career, you kind of get put in between the MLBPA, minor league baseball, and you're just in this realm that you don't really understand because you kind of have enough service time where you feel like you should be protected here, but they have so much going on. And then you have the minor leagues, but you're not really a minor leaguer. They kind of look up to you. It's just it's a weird place to be at. I call it the kind of like, I don't know, Bermuda Triangle of sorts of the minor leagues, because it's a weird place.
Like purgatory.
It kind of is. You're getting paid more than other minor leaguers, and like they kind of resent you for it. And it's a weird place. I learned to really embrace it, especially my last year. I loved it with Tampa Bay. I kind of just said, this may be it. I'm just going to pour into these guys and love it, and I did.
So from Texas, then you went to the Cardinals, the Braves, the Brewers, and then the Rays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why?
So I left Texas because there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes. It's kind of what I was going to tell you about earlier on. Had a lot of medical issues and a lot of paperwork that wasn't submitted. And I almost got in a lot of trouble. Lady from the MLB actually saved me when I was in St. Louis. They didn't turn in my TUE. I've had ADA my entire life. And we had 180 emails exchanged between about a 3-week span. And I was the first person, to my knowledge, to not get in trouble for failing a drug test because I didn't do anything wrong. It was just the passing of hands messed up. So that was a toll that I cannot explain how hard it was, because in 15 and 16, my dad got cancer. We moved home for 7 weeks. I did my rehab on my own, went to spring training with Texas, had to move way too fast. I was about 6 weeks ahead of schedule. And then when I get to Round Rock, I'm playing, and then I get a call that I failed a drug test. And so obviously we appeal it, blah, blah. Damon's like, I have all your paperwork. This makes no sense. Sure enough, it was in the fax machine. Nobody picked it up. Nobody said a word. And I ended up paying $1,000 to see 2 doctors just to cover, because I had a doctor who's MLB certified from the Rockies. And then I went and saw a Texas doctor. So I saw both doctors, and it was just a giant disaster. Once again, it dehumanizes things. And that's where, when you go back to the mental health, where's the problem? And that's the problem, is like the guy that actually makes all the rules and tells you the medications you can take, what you can and can't do, how often you can do it, blah, blah, blah. I've never met him. I've never seen him. I know his name. And that's not okay. Like, I was a kid, diagnosed with a bunch of issues. I was able to work through them. And then you start messing with them when I'm 28, 29 years old. Come on. So all in all, somebody knew who I was in the MLB front office and stood up for me. And that's how it all changed. But all in that time, Cardinals let me play. I was in the minor leagues with them. Once they gave me freedom of that, because I knew it was coming down on me at some point, like, you can kind of see the shift in the numbers. I just took off. And it's because, like, that brought so much perspective of how easily things can be taken away and how it can be taken away out of your control. And then I had my dad going through cancer. So, like, I had a giant, like, outlook that most people couldn't really get. So no matter what happened that year, I was just kind of floating through. So it was a crazy year. The other regret in signing was I got lied to with the Atlanta Braves. So I regret that signing. But once again, that gave me a chance to go play for the Brewers, meet some cool people. I had a blast doing that. So, like, all these things, good, bad, or ugly, I actually love that they happened. Every bit of it. And most people think I'm nuts when I say that, like, but I really do. Like, I say, man, that taught me something. I learned something, and it's given me a chance to pour into kids and pro guys and college guys that I could have never dreamed to do, because my perspective and my, I guess, perceived reality completely changed. Because I was always a happy-go-lucky, like, nothing ever goes wrong, and I got to see a lot of the opposite for certain things in my life, and it really helped me out to understand, what it takes. Like, if you can look at this and you could say, all right, I can hop that, kind of maneuver through this, you can do anything in life.
Did you anticipate the Rays being your final stop?
No. Nope, not at all. I thought I was going to play the next year. I wanted to finish out that year. They kept me around for some reason. I wasn't necessarily playing well, but I was learning. I really got close with the analytical department. They gave me access to stuff that I really appreciate because I was older and I wanted to learn, and they allowed that to be. So I enjoyed it. I get to catch some of the game's best prospects, and they're now dominating in the big league. So looking back at it, it was really cool. I got to end as a champion. We won the national championship. So it was a cool year. They called me Grandpa, called them the Mickey Mouse Club. So we just had a good time, and I kind of knew my role as more of a coach than I was a player, but I enjoyed it. And then I kind of went in the off season, kind of open-minded. I had a couple teams I wanted to sign with. I didn't think they were going to call, and then they both called. So I had to make a decision. So.
And then, speaking of stats, was that your first kind of rendezvous with the statistics side of baseball?
I got into biomechanics with the hitting coach in St. Louis. Um, I'd always been an approach guy, and they called me the mechanic in the cage because I had so many different drills. I was always willing to try and understand certain things, and I love talking hitting. So it's more of a cage rat, more of a bullpen nerd than anything. So once somebody opened the door to it, I just couldn't get enough of it. So yeah, when Tampa Bay kind of happened, it opened up the door to all of it. But I would say in 15 is where I really like fell in love with it, because I ended up running the meetings in Colorado, or pitchers meetings. So I was up there instead of our advanced scout. Advanced scout said, "Hey, come meet with me. Let's talk." And they're going to see it differently coming from you. And then it really was a great idea by him, because then they kind of migrated to me, like, and talk to me about different things. And then I would be out in the bullpen a lot of times when they would go in. We would talk before they went in. So that's kind of when it really started. I got really close to that advanced scout, great guy, Chris Warren, and then kind of went on from there. And then Pandora's box opened when I learned TrackMan, Flight Scope, Rapsodo. I was like, oh man, spin. I like this. So.
And one of my friends and I were just having this conversation, and I wanted to ask you about it. What stat do you think is the most indicative on either side, pitching and then hitting, of a player that's struggling?
Probably the type of contact given up, and if you go on Baseball Savant, what they're swinging at or where they're throwing. So like if you see a guy missing big or swinging and missing big, or if you see a guy making weak contact and you see a guy, kind of finding a lot of hard contact, those are probably the two things that really jump out. They do the expected ERA and all that stuff, but I feel like that, depending on your defense, you can kind of look at that a kind of a weird way. And I'll be interested to see how that changes with the shift kind of going away next year. So I would say like hard contact is probably the biggest thing on both sides. If you get a guy that normally has swing and miss stuff and that's really down, that's a problem. If you have a guy that normally throws strikes, he starts walking guys or getting behind the count, that's a huge problem. So like kind of both ways, what the pitcher's trying to do is get ahead, put him away. Hitter's trying to get that leverage count and put some damage to him. So if that throttles either way, that's when you're going to start seeing it. And then the trend's the exact opposite. If you see a guy, man, he's 0 for his last 15, but you look back and say, holy shnikes, he's been hitting the ball way above league average. He's been really living in that barrel range of contact, which I think not barrels, but barrel range. So I think barrel range is more of a line drive hitter, hitting the ball really, really hard. So if he's just pounding the ball on the ground, hitting the ball hard, it's not the same as if he's like lining out. So kind of look at that. Is he chasing? No. Oh, he's gotten some really tough calls. And then you start to see the trend coming. Like Mitch Keller's a great example. Last start, I used a bunch of examples of, hey, all of his pitch qualities moved up. His expected ERA is way below his actual ERA. His walk rate is high. His strikeout rate is low. If this starts to even out, all this other stuff's going to play incredibly well. And that's what happened his last start.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about, for example, batters striking out looking, and on the pitching side, how many balls are you willing to throw consecutively before the strike comes? And it was just these kind of minute obscurities that if you're looking at a box score, for example, you'll see, but the average baseball enjoyer may just glance over and look past. So I wanted to see what you would say.
I would tell you something you could pay attention to, and you talk to your friend. I'd love to hear what you guys think after you look at it. Is the difference in like the wildly successful guys to the guys that like, man, that guy's stuff is off the charts, but he can't seem to grab all the success. Start paying attention when they don't have their best stuff. Like they don't have the ability to do this, they don't have the ability to do that, but somehow they wiggle out 6 innings, 3 runs, right? And that's really the game changer, in my opinion, of like what separates guys is who identifies on a daily basis what they have and what they can compete with, and doesn't try to force feed themselves the scouting report or what they should do Because if you don't have it, you don't have it, right? We're all human beings. Like, oh, I have a blister on my finger. I can't throw that breaking ball the same way. It doesn't mean you don't throw it. Maybe you just have to emphasize it a different way, think about it a different way, utilize it a different way. But those are the guys that really kind of jump, ship compared to everybody else. Everybody's like cruising along. These guys look like they're not going to be on that rowboat anymore. I'm going to go be on my yacht over here because it's just different. So start paying attention to that, especially like hitters that, like Brian Reynolds with us right now in the Pirates is struggling. And when he really struggles, he's going to swing and miss a lot. But when he starts taking his walks and slowing the game down, that trend's about to kick up. Well, guys on the opposite end of the spectrum, that they'll start panicking, to start swinging more, start trying to force things where if you're a pitcher, what are you going to do? You're going to expose that in some way. So just kind of watch the guys that actually are playing the game within the game.
What do you tell a pitcher during a mound visit? What actually goes into that conversation?
It depends on the guy. There's some guys that are so serious. You got to go out with like a legit conversation about the game. There's other guys that are completely like not, and you got to have some fun with them. And then there's the in between. You got to kind of figure out where you're going to go. Like there's some guys that come out of that bullpen that may be a little bit psychopath oriented, and you got to deal with that. So like you kind of play into it. Like, hey, I just want you to go out there and, I want you to eat his face off right now. Just whatever you got to do, just eat his face off. And they'll play into that. You have fun with it. And other times like, hey man, like if you get this guy out, like steak dinner afterwards, like whatever. And then sometimes you make fun of the umpire, you make somebody, like there's one guy that I would make, like, I can't remember who it was, his dad or somebody. I would find somebody that looked like somebody he knew in the stands. I'd be, hey, look over there. Look over there. Does that look like Super Mario or what? And just have fun with them. So like, you just play the game within their head because most of the time they know what to do. They've been overly prepared. So it's how can you, calm their nerves? How can you get them fired up? How can you bring up their morale? Whatever have you. You just kind of play that personality depending on the day.
And then working through your exit from baseball and your interest in player development, when did you discover that would be the next stage of your life?
I think I always knew it was there. I just didn't want to see it until I was done playing. I was always, giving back, doing camps, working with kids. I always took a guy or two underneath my wing because that's what I was shown. Somebody took me underneath their wing when I was young. So I kind of paid it forward, and those guys did as well. So I always knew it was there. I tried not to, I guess, feed that hunger too much while I was playing. It was hard not to because I think it was just ingrained in me. So it was kind of easy transition into, post baseball. I was like, I'm going to start working a lot more with kids, start doing some, biomechanics and blah, 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 whatever I could do to help that next person, whether it was building a business, going to school, giving advice, or chasing a dream.
Where do you stand on the instant replay in baseball discussion?
So here's my thing. All right. What I think they should do is, I love how they call it out now. They turn on the mic. I think that's great. But I want a big, giant siren at the top of center field. And as soon as they call something, yes, like, woo, woo, as soon as it goes wrong, right? And they throw I want them to throw a flag in. Just think it makes sense. And honestly, like, they want to speed up the game. Well, not only do you speed it up, you make it entertaining, right? If something
that would
happens,
definitely be entertaining.
Yeah, like just have some fun with it. Like in Pittsburgh, they could shoot off a cannon. The Pirates, boom, replay, throw it in. He knows he's wrong immediately. They have so many camera angles. It takes them so long. I don't get it. I'm in that side right now. I'm in the media, so it's our cameras that they have. I'm like, how do they not see this? And then sometimes it really is like, I don't know what they're gonna do here. And obviously you're gonna give the benefit of the doubt to your guys, but yeah, I say if they know immediately, just let it go, right? That would be fun to me. That's what I think about it, because everything's all about speed up the game, speed up the game, speed up the game. They need to make the game more entertaining. They need to give more access to the fans. Speeding the game is going to do nothing. 15 minutes? You kidding me? I can't keep my nephew's attention for 4 seconds. They're talking about 15 minutes in a 2.5-hour game. We have to make it more entertaining, period, right? We have to make these guys more available. If that doesn't happen, the other stuff doesn't matter. So a siren, a cannonball, the lights where they flicker, I don't care what they do. Just make it super obvious that this guy missed the call. And I think they can have fun with it too. Like, I missed it, guys, and blah, 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 whatever. It'd be great. You like that? That's pretty good.
That's definitely an idea.
Yeah, it'd be entertaining.
And then going back to your player development work, what do you think is missing from the current player development process?
Emotions. Go back to that. I think the human element's the biggest missing picture. I'm actually really diving in hard to figure out a way to quantify it. It's just really tough because you have to do it from an individual level. You can't do it from a team level. You can't group it together. You have to really look at it as like, who is this person? Where do they come from? You may even have to get into some genetics, but they're doing wearables. They're doing all kinds of different things. And then how do you enhance each individual based on that? So like, for example, if the world fell apart and I went and played today, I would probably have success. If it was sunshine and rainbows, I'd probably strike out 3 times as a player. Like, I was better in distress. I was better angry. Almost every time I got in a fight, and she's going to hurt me for saying this, every time me and my wife got in a fight as a player, I usually hit 2 homers, like, or at least 1. Like, I would just dominate that day offensively because my focus would be so on that and my care for her that, like, it would slow the game down because the perspective changed, right? Not everybody's like that. Like, I fed off of, negativity, protecting my my other guys. Like, all those things ever since I was a kid was always a benefit for me. Not for most, right? Other people want to, get their chi and slow down. It's like, no, I want the chaos. Like, throw like a grenade over here and a grenade over here, and then throw the pitch, and I'll be fine. Because it made me focus more. I think just with my ADD and all that stuff, that's just who I was. So, but I didn't understand that until I was 29, 30. So I was like wiggling away, not wiggling in. So I think the sooner you can understand really who you are and maximize that, and I think the Navy SEALs do the best job of that because they always talk about the teams, right? The teams. What they never talk about is you have to get through buds to be on the teams. You don't go through buds as a team. You go through buds as an individual. So I think, and that's almost like a brainwash of sorts to get to that elite level. But I think there's some way, shape, or form that you can understand a lot of those things emotionally, physically, and mentally to take you to that next level. If you really are willing to look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is who I am, this is what makes me successful, and own it.
Wow. That's the end of the questions I have to ask today. Is there anything that you think that I missed? Anything that you wanted to talk about before we go?
I would love to know one thing. Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do?
Yeah, and like, where did your passion come from? Because I can tell, like, the mentality side is obviously your thing, and I love that. Like, I don't think there's enough awareness there, and I don't think there's enough women there, because I think you bring a different dynamic. It's easy to get a dude talking to a dude about baseball where it's like, hey, let me give you a different perspective here. And some of the greatest information I ever received was actually from my wife, because she had
sounds lovely.
Well, she's the best, but like, she had a different perspective and she looked at it differently. And I think there's a big miss in the game. Not just like, I love the fact that, like, you can be in the clubhouse, you can be on the field, but like, there's a different aspect of like that 10,000 foot view too, that's not utilized as much. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask, like, why do you do what you want to do? What do you want to do with it? Where are you? I just think it's really interesting.
Well, geographically, I'm about 55 miles south of you in Morgantown.
Come on.
I wouldn't lie.
What a small world.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm actually running camera for the Pirates Padres game this weekend on the 29th.
Shut up.
I wouldn't lie about that. So I wanted to bring that up and see if you were going to be there as well.
I will. I'll be there for the pregame show, and I think it's 132, section 132. So if you tell me, just send me a message what camera you're at, I'd love to come say hello.
Yeah, For
That's
sure.
so cool.
So it was so fun when I saw the Mountaineer football jersey on the background. I was like, hey.
That's crazy.
But getting back to why I do what I do, I just think that the athlete mental health space is kind of barren in terms of large scale dialogues. I mean, there's constant conversation from teammate to teammate, but there isn't anywhere that I've really found. I mean, there are a couple that are doing really good work, like the Hidden Opponent and the Sideline Perspective and the Players Tribune, when they do put out mental health focused features. I mean, they talk about a lot of other stuff as well. And there wasn't really a space that wanted to do it like I wanted to do it. And this, what we're recording right now, what is currently recording, will be edited, and then I'll write a script and put it together, and then the entire episode will come out sort of like a documentary style. And there is no one else doing mental health storytelling for athletes the way I am. And I saw that as a real void, especially with the current climate of college athletics, with them having more space to talk about what they're dealing with. And I mean, it's horrendous, but there was just another college athlete who committed suicide yesterday. And it's stories like that in the moment they feel so alone. But I mean, it all comes down to some very simple principles like athlete identity and anxiety and depression and not feeling like you can be yourself or feeling overloaded. And so it's so interesting. This episode is almost, I think we're in the mid 60s of weekly content being put out. And it's so interesting that I've interviewed athletes from, I think I'm up to maybe 8 countries and a ton of different sports. And it all comes down to kind of these basic tenets of human nature. And I think that's so interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. I would love to have you on something I'm doing here soon.
Cool.
And we'll dive as deep as you would like to dive into it. I'm going to be doing some stuff for a tactical community and some other things, and then stick and ball kind of Lazarus itself out of the grave here soon. So if you ever want to do anything with them, their owner's a really good friend of mine. They're looking for quality people, and yeah, you seem like a quality person. So
I mean,
cool.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'll DM you about that. That sounds really cool. And then I'll also tell you what camera I'm at on Friday. And
yeah, so you have kind of like a multifaceted thing right now. So
yeah. So I have this podcast, and then I also run a ton of camera for Major League Baseball and various NCAA teams and sports. I do a lot.
Sounds like it. Well, if you're a freelancer, I may hire you as a camera person. You have some of your own equipment?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I will DM you and I'll give you my number, because
Awesome.
I do a lot of stuff at schools.
Cool.
And I'm always looking for someone to kind of come capture it.
Yeah.
Interviews, talk to people.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you're interested in that,
totally down to do that.
Well, cool. I would definitely love for you to do that. So
cool. Yeah. And I'll talk to you later. This episode should come out. Let's see. So your episode will be 69 of the podcast. And it's coming out on January, February, March, April, May, June 1st.
Okay, cool.
So you have about a month. All I need from you right now is a picture that I can use either of you now, you in action. It doesn't really matter what the picture is. I mean, I've had headshots, I've had action shots, just to use for social media.
Cool. Yeah, I'll give you a couple different ones.
Okay. And if there's anything, I always say this, if there's anything that happens between now and the time that your podcast comes out, just DM me, I'll add it to the script.
Cool. Yeah, I enjoyed this.
Awesome. I did too.
Again sometime. Yeah. Absolutely.
It was so good meeting you, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.